Quite a number of scientists, perhaps most notably Sir Isaac Newton, over the centuries have claimed that science is a tool that we can use to explore and also to explain God's magnificent creation, the universe and everything that goes on within it. But some theologians go one step further than that and say that science is something, it's a gift from God, that science wouldn't work if it wasn't for God, and therefore the fact that science works is evidence that God exists. I think this is a really interesting claim to consider, and to consider the alternatives to science existing and how that functions in terms of evidence for a God or gods. I think perhaps the first thing to consider is what is the fundamental thing that science requires for it to work. And I would contend that that is consistency, it is repeatability, 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 repeatability. It is a universe where if A leads to B, then A always leads to B, whether in the mechanistic sense of a Newtonian or a relativistic universe, or in the statistical sense with regard to things like quantum mechanics. And the reason that that repeatability is so important, so critically important, is because repeatability allows for predictability. It means that we can take a set of data points and interpolate and extrapolate on those data points. It means that we can look at what happened in the past and say on the basis of what happened in the past that we can make predictions about what can happen in the future. Science would not be possible if it were not for repeatability of experiments. In fact, we wouldn't even be here because evolution, the process of evolution, would not be possible. There would be no adaptations that would be advantageous to an organism if the future bore no resemblance to what had happened in the past. So I think this is a pretty fundamental thing that we're talking about here that even goes beyond the realm of science itself. So what I propose to do is have a little bit of fun with this, and later on in the video we'll be looking at the miracle of repeatability over with my correspondent who is presently in Italy waiting for me to get in touch with him. And then perhaps look at the kind of conversations that we'd be having in other galaxies that don't have this principle of repeatability, where science doesn't work properly. But first off, what I want to do is to consider what it would look like to be in a world where things weren't repeatable, where science didn't work. And to do that, I want to consider some pool balls. Now, under normal circumstances, if a cue ball strikes the object ball in a half ball contact, as you can see, both balls go off at a 45-degree angle from the original direction of travel, and that will happen each and every time. That's why science works. That's what allows us to play pool. But in an unrepeatable universe, that might not work, right? On one occasion, the cue ball might strike the object ball and end up coming right back from where it came from, whereas the object ball takes the path that the cue ball would have took. On the next occasion we try it, perhaps the cue ball strikes the object ball and then the cue ball comes straight out at the camera, whereas the object ball turns into Skippy, the bush kangaroo. Clearly, I hope you would agree that this would be quite a testing set of circumstances to try to complete a game of pool, not least because there's every chance that even before you've completed the game, the table itself will have turned into the Beardmore Glacier. The balls will have turned into a troop of polar bears singing Malcolm McLaren's Double Dutch.
Double Dutch, that's them dancing.
Skip they do the double dash, press they dancing. Skip they do the double dash, press they dancing.
And I know that sounds horribly fucked up and unbelievable because polar bears are from the North Pole and the Beardmore is from the South Pole, but I hope that gives you the kind of idea of the problems that we would have in a universe where there is no repeatability, no consistency. But that brings us on to our first issue, which is that if repeatability and consistency is evidence for God, then a lack of repeatability, a lack of consistency would be evidence against God. But hang on, isn't a lack of consistency what constitutes a miracle? Maybe now would be a good time to go and have a word with that correspondent of mine who is presently in Italy. Thank you, Noel, and welcome to Rome, to the magnificent church of Santa Maria in Transportina. It sounds like a song, and there's certainly been plenty of singing and merriment from the myriad Christians that have descended upon this church here over the last couple of days for what many of them are describing as the greatest Christian miracle since the time of Jesus Christ himself. We're joined here today by Reverend David Badger Buggerer, who is the parish priest of Barton cum Scrotum in southern Lincolnshire. Reverend Badger Buggerer, perhaps you could describe for us exactly what it is that's got Christians so excited and what's brought you to this small church here today.
Oh, this is a marvellous day. I am so excited. I really can't overplay, I suppose, the theological significance, but I'm going to say it, the scientific significance of what has happened here over the last few days. For 300 years, this magnificent statue has refused to bleed even a single tear of blood, and then this happens.
So David, what exactly happened this week that caused so much excitement?
As far as I'm aware, the local priest was just going about his usual chores, as one does, and then he noticed it. The statue was doing absolutely nothing remarkable whatsoever. And then it occurred to him that then for 300 years, nothing remarkable had occurred with this statue. So he contacted his cardinal, and the news spread like wildfire. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, everybody wants to be here, everybody wants to see for themselves this magnificent statue doing absolutely nothing whatsoever.
And what would you say this means to you personally?
Oh, without doubt, the greatest moment of my life. This is the vindication of my faith. You see, you have to understand, God has given us science as a way of understanding the world that he has created for us. Without this miracle, the miracle of miracles not happening, we wouldn't be able to understand the universe. We wouldn't be able to understand or function in the world that he has created. Only a truly omnipotent God could stop this statue from bleeding, and that is the miracle. That is the miracle of God not allowing miracles to happen. It's a marvellous day.
Reverend David Badger Buggerer, thank you very much. And now back to Noel in the studio. It really does seem like the religious are having their cake and eating it if they want us to accept that both the miraculous and the out of ordinary are evidence for God, and also the mundane and the normal and the repeatable, the predictable and the expected are evidence for God. Also, it seems as if anything, whatever shape or form it takes, is evidence for God. But imagine for a moment if we lived in a universe that was entirely inconsistent, entirely unrepeatable, entirely unpredictable. What kind of conversations may a theist and an atheist be having in such a universe? I wonder. So, you're an atheist? Yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't believe a God exists, and I don't believe a God created the universe. So, can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure, fire away. Okay, so you accept that random, spontaneous shit happens in this universe all the time? Yeah. You accept that this universe is totally unpredictable and we can draw no conclusions on what will happen next by looking at what has already happened? Aye, pretty much. That science, logic and mathematics are all futile endeavours? Yeah. So, if random and unpredictable acts happen all the time, what or who do you think causes those acts to occur?
I see what you mean. If random shit happens, you need a random shit happener. And that random shit happener we call God.
Okay, but what about miracles? I thought you guys claimed miracles were evidence for God. By miracles you mean those extremely rare occasions where priests have managed to make science work? Aye, that is exactly what I mean. Well, occasionally our Lord clearly intervenes and causes the same actions to have the same effects. These are miracles, suspensions of the natural order of chaos and off-the-wall craziness. Well, up and that seems to make sense.
But hold on a minute. If your argument makes sense, for any argument to make sense, that means that logic isn't futile. Oh, I suppose it does. And if logic being futile proves God, then logic not being futile must disprove God. True, but to make that point you need to presuppose a God to make the point you just made. Hold on a minute, what was your name again? Ten Bruggencake. Wow, fuck, don't tell me you exist in this universe as well. You know, I feel a little bit spoilt because it isn't very often I have a video that is as easy to make as this video has been, albeit with the extra little bits of bullshit production tacked on. But this is an argument that all you effectively have to do is tell it in its full form, and it manages to rebut itself. It's always the sign of a really bad argument, which when you make that argument in reverse, it makes more sense than the way it is actually being made. In this case, it makes more sense to say, if something random, something unpredictable and spontaneous and weird happens, to say, what is the cause of this thing? What has caused this thing out the blue? This unexpected thing to happen, than to say nothing untoward, nothing unpredictable has happened. Everything is just the same as we would expect it. Something must be causing that. Something must be actively stopping unpredictable, wild and wacky things from happening. Doesn't make any kind of intuitive sense to me, and that doesn't make any logical sense to me either. Well, look, I hope that that's tackled this argument. I also hope it's put a little bit of a smile on your face. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and bye for now.